Imagine a world where nations no longer fear weapons, no longer fear armies, no longer fear chaos, and yet they tremble. Why? Because a giant has awakened. A nation they once ignored, once underestimated, once labeled weak, has now risen with a fire the world cannot contain. That nation is India. And the greatest fear across boardrooms, parliaments, and global powers is not what India has been, but what India is becoming, an unstoppable force rewriting the future of the world. The world looked at India and thought it was weak. They saw hunger, they saw poverty, they saw people hustling just to survive, and they whispered, "This nation will never rise." But what they didn't see was the fire being forged in the furnace of adversity. They didn't see that every broken road was building endurance. Every hungry night was sharpening hunger for greatness. Every overlooked talent was being prepared to shock the world. See, the mistake they made was confusing struggle with defeat. Struggle is not defeat, struggle is training. And while the world was laughing, India was learning. While they were doubting, India was developing. And now, the same nation they once underestimated is the very nation they fear, because the underdog has learned how to win. India's story is not the story of comfort, it is the story of survival. Generations walked through fire, carried the weight of oppression, endured storms that would have broken other nations. But survival has a strange way of preparing you for greatness, because once you learn how to survive the impossible, leading the possible becomes inevitable. That is what makes India dangerous to the world today. It no longer wakes up just to endure another day, it wakes up to conquer it. And the shift from survival to dominance is the most powerful transformation any nation can make. The world can compete with strength, it can compete with numbers, but it cannot compete with a people who have mastered the art of survival and now have set their sights on leadership. When survival is your past and dominance is your present, the future is untouchable. The real power is not in numbers, not in weapons, not even in wealth. The real power is belief. And that is what has changed in India. For years, the world counted India's people as statistics, but now those very people have begun to count themselves as visionaries. 1 billion voices once doubting now speak with certainty. 1 billion hands once waiting now build with confidence. And when belief takes root in the heart of a nation, it becomes a weapon sharper than steel, stronger than any army. That's why the world trembles, not because of what India has, but because of what India knows. It knows its worth. It knows its future. And when a nation begins to believe it was created to lead, there is no force on earth that can convince it otherwise. Innovation has become India's sharpest sword, and the world didn't see it coming. While others were busy protecting old systems, India was busy creating new ones. From the smallest villages to the tallest towers, ideas are exploding, startups are multiplying, technology is advancing at a pace that shakes the giants of Silicon Valley. And here's the fear: innovation doesn't ask for permission. It disrupts, it replaces, it rewrites the rules. The West once exported technology to India. Now India is exporting innovation to the world. Every app, every code, every breakthrough is a reminder that this nation is no longer a consumer. It is a creator. And when 1 billion minds decide to innovate, the game doesn't just change, the game gets rebuilt from the ground up. India's economy is no longer crawling. It's sprinting, and the world can't keep up. Every quarter, every year, the numbers rise higher, the markets grow stronger, and the old predictions fall apart. They said India would take a century to catch up, but India is doing it in decades. And here's what shakes the world. This growth is not built on borrowed strength. It's built on the sweat, the skill, and the spirit of its own people. The farmer, the coder, the entrepreneur, the dreamer, all are driving an economy that refuses to slow down. And when an economy grows with that kind of momentum, it doesn't just add numbers to chart. It rewrites global equations. The fear is not just how fast India is growing. The fear is how unstoppable that growth has become. The balance of power is shifting, and the world feels it. India is no longer waiting for a seat at the table, it's building its own table. For decades, global leaders dictated the terms, handed out the rules, and expected India to follow. But now India is the one setting the tone, shaping conversations, influencing decisions that ripple across continents. Whether it's trade, technology, defense, or diplomacy, the world cannot move without India's voice being heard. And that is what unsettles the powerful. They can no longer ignore, no longer control, no longer dismiss. Because when a nation that was once silenced starts speaking with authority, its voice doesn't just echo, it commands. And India's voice is no longer a whisper, it is thunder shaking the global stage. India is no longer waking up each morning just to get by. It's no longer just about surviving another day, another crisis, another challenge. That chapter is over. For centuries, survival was the story. Enduring invasions, enduring colonization, enduring exploitation, enduring the weight of being told what it could never become. But survival has an expiration date. You see, once a people learn how to endure the worst, there comes a time when they stop asking, "How do we survive?" and they start asking, "How do we lead?" And that's exactly where India stands right now. The mindset has shifted. The posture has changed. The nation is no longer bowed down under the weight of history. It's standing tall, declaring to the world, "We are here, and we are ready to lead." And here's the secret the world doesn't want to admit. Leadership is not about resources, it's about resolve. Many nations have resources. Many nations have wealth. Many nations have power. But not every nation has the scars that teach endurance, the hunger that fuels vision, the resilience that builds unshakable strength. India has walked through fire and come out refined like gold, and now that resilience is no longer being used just to survive, it's being invested in leadership. And that's the shift that makes the world tremble. Because when a nation is only fighting to survive, the world can manage it. You can control it, contain it, even manipulate it. But when that same nation stops fighting for survival and starts positioning itself for leadership, you can't stop it. You have to deal with it. And right now, the world is having to deal with India in a way it never had to before. India is not asking for help. India is not begging for recognition. India is not seeking validation. India is declaring with its actions, not just its words, that it is here to lead. Look at the evidence. Leadership in technology. India is not just taking jobs, it's creating industries. Leadership in economics. India is not just receiving investments, it's attracting the world's attention because of unstoppable growth. Leadership in diplomacy. India is not just attending global summits, it's shaping the outcomes. Leadership in culture. India is not just preserving tradition, it's exporting it influencing how the world eats, prays, celebrates, even how it thinks. Leadership in values. While the world fractures under greed and division, India holds on to unity, family, and spirituality, showing the world another way. This is what frightens the powers that have ruled for so long. India has shifted its fight. It is no longer a nation struggling to hold itself together. It is a nation ready to hold others accountable. It is no longer asking, "Who will save us?" but rather declaring, "We will lead ourselves, and in doing so, we will inspire others." That is a terrifying thought to those who once controlled the narrative, because leadership isn't just about what you say, it's about what you demonstrate. And India is demonstrating that leadership is no longer the privilege of the West, no longer the inheritance of a few elite nations. It is the destiny of those who refuse to die in survival mode. India has declared that season over. Understand this: the transition from survival to leadership is the most dangerous transformation a nation can make. Dangerous not for the nation making it, but for everyone else who has built their power on its silence. You can silence a survivor, but you cannot silence a leader. You can ignore a struggler, but you cannot ignore a builder. You can overlook the weak, but you cannot overlook the strong who are now standing eye to eye with you. India has embraced leadership in its heart, and when leadership takes root in the heart of a billion people, it becomes unstoppable. That is why global boardrooms are anxious. That is why governments are cautious. That is why headlines are filled with questions, predictions, even warnings about India's rise. Because the world knows this truth: a nation that has mastered survival is a nation fully equipped for leadership. And leadership backed by the power of survival is leadership that cannot be shaken, cannot be bought, cannot be broken. India no longer wakes up asking, "How do we get through this?" It wakes up declaring, "How do we dominate in this?" That is why India is feared. That is why the shift from survival to leadership is the single most disruptive force shaking the world today. And if you think the world is afraid of what India is now, wait until you see what it becomes next. India carries something the world cannot duplicate, cannot manufacture, cannot buy. It is the power of ancient wisdom flowing into modern innovation. Most nations have either history or technology, tradition or progress, spirituality or science, but India has both. And that blend is what makes it unstoppable. The West built its strength on machines, on weapons, on systems. But India is building its strength on centuries of wisdom, timeless principles of resilience, discipline, and vision infused into cutting-edge innovation. That is not just power, that is power with depth. That is not just progress, that is progress with roots. Think about it. While the rest of the world is busy chasing trends that will vanish tomorrow, India is drawing from truths that have lasted thousands of years. And when you combine truth that never dies with innovation that never stops, you get a force that cannot be shaken. The yogi and the coder, the teacher and the entrepreneur, the farmer and the engineer, the tradition bearer and the startup founder. India is not choosing one or the other. It is fusing them into something the world has never seen before. And here's why that creates fear. Because the world knows how to compete with technology, but it does not know how to compete with technology fueled by timeless wisdom. You can outbuild machines, but you cannot outlast principles that have endured through ages. India's edge is not just its innovation. It's that its innovation is rooted in a deeper philosophy of purpose, unity, and vision. That means India doesn't just innovate to profit, it innovates to transform, to elevate, to lead. The greatest power is not the newest gadget or the fastest algorithm. It is the mindset of a people who know where they come from and where they are going. India has that. The West builds for decades, India builds for generations. Others chase speed, India chases legacy. That combination is what terrifies the world, because a nation with innovation can rise, but a nation with innovation anchored in wisdom will reign. And India is stepping into that reign right now. 1 billion people moving in different directions is just noise, but 1 billion people moving with one heartbeat, one dream, one vision. That's a movement that shakes the earth. And that's exactly what India carries right now. For too long, the world thought India was divided by language, by region, by religion, by class. But what they didn't see was that underneath those differences lies a pulse that beats the same. The pulse of a nation determined to rise. And when that pulse begins to sink, when that heartbeat begins to unify, it produces an energy so powerful it cannot be contained by borders, it cannot be silenced by critics, it cannot be stopped by enemies. Unity is India's ultimate weapon. Not the kind of unity that erases diversity, but the kind that embraces it and turns it into strength. Because when 1 billion voices rise in harmony, they don't sound like chaos, they sound like destiny. And that's what terrifies the world. India is no longer just a collection of individuals, it is a collective force. A force that builds, a force that creates, a force that pushes the boundaries of what's possible. Understand this: no army, no corporation, no government can compete with the unstoppable momentum of 1 billion hearts on fire with the same dream. That is why the world feels threatened. Because when India unites, it doesn't just compete, it dominates. And when 1 billion hands build together, 1 billion minds think together, 1 billion hearts beat together, the question is no longer if India will lead. The only question is how far and how fast. The world is not shaken by what India is right now. The world is shaken by what it sees coming. Because the India of today is powerful, but the India of tomorrow is unstoppable. And every nation knows it. They can look at the charts, they can see the growth, they can feel the momentum, but what they can't measure is the hunger. Hunger is invisible on a graph, but it's undeniable in the spirit of a people. And India's hunger for greatness is roaring louder every single day. That hunger is what makes tomorrow dangerous for everyone who thought they had forever to stay on top. The fear is not in India's present, the fear is in its trajectory. Right now, India is still building, still rising, still shaping. But when all the pieces come together, its economy, its innovation, its culture, its unity, the future doesn't belong to the powers of the past, it belongs to India. And the world knows it. They don't say it out loud, but behind closed doors they strategize, they worry, they whisper. What happens when India arrives? Because they know once that moment comes, there will be no turning it back. And here's the truth: the future doesn't wait for permission. India isn't asking for a place at the table tomorrow. It's building the table today. And tomorrow, the world will have no choice but to sit at it. That is the nightmare of the old powers and the dream of 1 billion people rising together. Because India's tomorrow is not just about leading a nation. It's about shifting the course of history. And that, more than anything else, is why India has become the world's biggest fear. And so here we are, the world looking at India with eyes wide open, some with admiration, some with hesitation, and many with fear. Because what once was dismissed has now become undeniable. What was once underestimated has now become unstoppable. India has walked through the fire, carried the weight of history, turned survival into strength, and strength into leadership. And the truth is simple. The world does not fear what India was, it fears what India is becoming. A force of unity, a beacon of wisdom, an engine of innovation, a leader with vision. The time of silence is over. The season of survival is over. The roar of a billion hearts has begun, and the world can no longer ignore it. India has not just arrived, it is rising to reign.